It's been the worst time of my life. If somebody accused me of them or hurting them, I have a 22-year-old daughter. I would never hurt anyone.
I don't know what other actors go through and where they go to.
Okay.
It's not in my will. It's like I don't really want to do any more movies. I don't want to do that.
News just dropped that Clifton Powell's sentence is final, and there is no turning back this time. After years of building a respected career, everything now comes down to one verdict that shuts every door. How does a journey filled with talent, recognition, and steady success suddenly reach a point like this?
I've faced some issues in Hollywood. I lost a role because the network, which I won't name, said that they thought I was too dark and would scare everybody. I got fired from a show because I wouldn't play the coon on the show.
And what really happened behind the scenes that led to such a decisive outcome? Every detail tells a deeper story, and some parts might not be what anyone expected. Stay close, because the full picture reveals twists that make this outcome even more shocking. Clifton Powell's journey to stardom. A quiet beginning in Washington, D.C. on March 16, 1956, set the stage for a journey that would later feel both inspiring and surprising, especially when the name Clifton Powell comes into focus. Growing up in the Mayfair Mansions area in Northeast D.C. shaped early experiences, and schooling started at H.D. Woodson Senior High School before a transfer to Duke Ellington School of the Arts, a place known for building raw talent into something refined and powerful. That move alone raises a question. Does talent always find the right environment early? Or does environment create the confidence that talent needs to grow? Training continued at workshops for careers in the arts, a program built to sharpen skills for young creatives, and later came graduation from Emerson College. On paper, everything looked like a clear path toward success, but reality told a very different story. And that difference is where things start to get interesting. The journey into acting did not come with comfort or steady money, and that part always makes one pause for a moment. How does someone appear on screen, recognized by faces everywhere, yet struggle to afford basic things behind the scenes? Financial struggles followed for years, even while appearances in films and television slowly increased. At one point, a scooter worth about $700 became the main means of transportation. Imagine that situation for a second. Recognition growing, people pointing and saying that face looks familiar. Yet a simple scooter becomes a source of embarrassment. A memory stood out where a conversation at a club led to a claim about driving a Lexus, only for reality to show up later in the most unexpected way. That moment must have felt uncomfortable, right? A later upgrade to a Ford Festiva did not completely remove that feeling either, as walking toward that car in public still carried a sense of quiet embarrassment. It raises another question. How often does public success hide private struggle? Even more surprising, steady and consistent income did not arrive until the early 50s. That alone challenges a common belief that success always comes early. What keeps someone going through all that waiting? Then came the period where things started to shift. The 1990s opened doors with roles that began to stick in people's minds. Work in House Party introduced a presence that would grow stronger with time, followed by more intense roles in Menace to Society and Dead Presidents. These were not light roles, and each performance showed a depth that made audiences pay attention. That naturally leads to another thought. What makes a performance unforgettable? Is it the script, or the way an actor brings emotion into every scene? Late in the decade, recognition expanded with appearances in Why Do Fools Fall in Love and Rush Hour, both adding new layers to an already growing career. Then came a powerful portrayal of Martin Luther King Jr. in Selma, Lord, Selma, and that role alone carried weight that went beyond entertainment. Playing such a historical figure demands more than acting. It requires understanding, respect, and emotional control. Of course, there is one role that many people remember instantly, and that is Pinky in Next Friday and Friday After Next. That character brought humor, attitude, and a kind of energy that stayed with audiences long after the credits rolled. It is interesting to think about how one role can become so iconic that it almost defines an entire era of comedy. How does one character manage to stay in people's memories for so long? That moment marked a turning point where recognition became stronger and more widespread. The year 2004 added another layer of success with roles in Woman Thou Art Loosed and Ray, where the role of Jeff Brown, road manager to Ray Charles, earned an NAACP Image Award nomination. That kind of recognition showed that talent had always been there, waiting for the right moment to be fully seen. It also raises a simple but powerful question. How many talented people go unnoticed until the right opportunity finally appears? Over time, the body of work grew into more than 100 film and television credits. That number alone tells a story of persistence. Television roles included appearances in shows like Rock, South Central, and Army Wives, along with guest roles in Murder, She Wrote, NYPD Blue, CSI, Crime Scene Investigation, and House. Voice work in The Boondocks added another dimension, showing versatility beyond on-screen appearances. That kind of range makes one wonder, what truly defines a successful career? Is it awards, recognition, or simply the ability to keep working and evolving over time? The mid-2000s brought a shift toward smaller, low-budget, direct-to-video films, while television appearances continued. Some might see that as a step down, but another way to look at it brings a different perspective. Could that phase simply represent adaptation and survival in a competitive industry? Staying active, staying visible, and staying consistent sometimes matters more than the size of the project. Then, in 2016, a strong return to a major role came with Saints and Sinners, where a main antagonist role stood opposite Vanessa Bell Calloway and Gloria Rubin. That moment showed once again that timing plays a powerful role in any career. Looking at the full journey, one thought keeps coming back again and again. What really defines success? Early fame, steady income, or the ability to keep going even when things feel uncertain? The path here did not follow a straight line, and maybe that is exactly what makes the journey stand out. Years of struggle, moments of embarrassment, long periods without steady income, and yet a career that continued to grow. That contrast between public image and private reality adds depth to the entire story. Success did not arrive overnight, and comfort did not come early, but persistence stayed constant, steady, and unshaken, even when nothing seemed to be working. There's something quietly powerful about that kind of consistency, the kind that keeps moving forward without applause, without guarantees, and without immediate results. It doesn't shout for attention, yet it leaves a lasting impression on anyone paying close enough attention. And somehow, without saying much at all, it begins to answer every question that comes up along the way. Why keep going? What makes the difference? What truly matters in the end? The answers are hidden right there in the journey itself. And this is exactly where things start to become clearer. So stay right here, because breaking this down will change how this entire idea is understood. Understanding the sentence. A situation like this often begins in a way that feels simple on the surface, yet slowly turns into something far more serious. And that is exactly how the legal trouble involving Keontae Myers and Powell unfolded. Back in August 2012, a civil complaint was filed, and at first glance, the claims sounded heavy and deeply troubling. Questions naturally started to come up. What really happened on that night that led to such strong accusations? According to the complaint, an encounter had taken place about a year earlier, on August 28, 2011, in New Orleans, involving a meeting that began in a fairly ordinary way. Myers, described as a 24-year-old cocktail waitress working at Harrah's Casino, had reportedly agreed to spend time with Powell after finishing a work shift. Nothing about that decision sounded unusual at first, right? People meet, conversations happen, and plans get made. That part felt straightforward. But then, as the account continued, things took a serious turn. The complaint explained that both individuals went to the International House Hotel, where an initial encounter was described as consensual. That detail alone might make someone pause and think. If the beginning was agreed upon, then where exactly did everything change? The claim suggested that later in the night, Powell wanted to continue, but Myers said no, explaining that earlier actions had been too rough. That moment, became the center of everything. A simple question starts to form here. When one person says no after saying yes before, how clearly is that boundary understood? The complaint stated that pressure followed, and then more serious allegations came into play, including claims of force and distress. Because of that, a demand for $75,000 in damages was made, covering assault, battery, and emotional harm. That number alone makes someone wonder, was this about justice, compensation, or something else entirely? As the situation moved from accusation to investigation, a different layer began to appear. And this is where things became even more complicated. The police looked into the claims, and Detective Demita Williams played a key role in examining what actually happened. Now here is where things start to raise eyebrows. During questioning, when Myers was directly asked whether any force or intimidation had taken place, the response given was reportedly no. That single answer changed the tone of the entire case. How could such a strong claim stand when a key statement seemed to contradict it? This became one of the most talked about parts of the investigation. It introduced doubt, and doubt in cases like this carries a lot of weight. Powell maintained from the very beginning that everything that happened was consensual, and importantly, no criminal charges were ever filed. That detail matters more than many people realize. If law enforcement does not find grounds for arrest or charges, what does that say about the strength of the original claims? Even with all of that, the legal process did not just end there. In fact, things took another unexpected turn. And this part almost feels like something many people overlook when thinking about legal battles. Powell did not initially respond to the lawsuit. That decision, whether intentional or not, led to a default judgment being entered in August 2013. Now think about that for a second. How could someone lose a case without even arguing it? That is exactly what a default judgment means. No response leads to an automatic ruling. It sounds surprising, right? But that was not the end of the road. Years later, Powell challenged that outcome, and the court looked closely at how the legal papers were delivered in the first place. This detail might sound small, but it turned out to be very important. The process server had claimed that the documents were handed to someone identified as Powell's daughter, named Carrie Powell. But here is where things became even more unusual. Powell stated clearly that no daughter with that name existed. That raises a very simple but powerful question. If the documents were not properly delivered, could the entire judgment stand? The court eventually decided that the service of process had been improper, and because of that, the default judgment was vacated in January 2017. Just like that, the case reopened, and the earlier ruling was erased. It almost feels like the legal system pressing a reset button. But even after that, the situation still had one more twist. Powell then filed counterclaims for defamation in April 2017, likely aiming to address reputational damage caused by the accusations. That move makes sense when looking at the situation from another angle. If someone believes false claims caused harm, is it not natural to push back? However, timing became the issue here. The court dismissed the defamation claims because they were filed outside the allowed one-year period under Louisiana law. That rule might seem strict, but legal timelines are often very precise. Miss a deadline, and even a strong claim can fall apart. Does that feel fair or frustrating? That depends on perspective, but in this case, the court followed the rule as written. Eventually, Judge Sarah S. Vance vacated the default judgment and cleared Powell in the federal civil case. That decision marked a major turning point and brought a sense of closure to the legal battle. After everything, the outcome leaned in Powell's favor, largely due to procedural issues and conflicting evidence that weakened the original claims. Looking at the entire situation, a deeper question starts to linger. How often do legal outcomes depend not just on what happened, but on how well each step of the process is handled? When everything is put together, this case becomes more than just a dispute between two individuals. It highlights how complex legal systems can be, how statements can shift the direction of a case, and how timing and procedure can shape final outcomes. Every detail mattered, from a single answer in a police interview to the way documents were served. That alone makes someone stop and think. In situations like this, what truly defines justice? Is it the initial claim, the investigation findings, or the final court decision? There may not be one simple answer, And maybe that is what makes everything feel so unsettling. Because when every piece of this story is laid out, it becomes impossible to ignore how every step, every word, and every action carried a weight no one fully understood in the moment. The smallest decisions, the ones that seemed insignificant at first, slowly built into something much bigger, something that would eventually shape the outcome in ways no one could take back. And just when it feels like the dust might finally settle, a new layer begins to unfold. What happened after the verdict is where things take an even more unexpected turn. Stay with this till the very end, because what followed left a lasting impact no one saw coming. The fallout from the verdict. A deep and emotional wave followed the verdict, and conversations began to circle around how everything unfolded for Powell, especially from the people closest to the situation. News came through Powell's attorney, Eric Carter, who shared the first real sense of relief after such a long and draining period. Carter explained that Powell felt blessed, and that sense of blessing did not come from victory alone, but from finally seeing truth come into the light after years of pressure, doubt, and public judgment. A quiet question naturally rises here. What does relief even feel like after carrying such a heavy burden for so long? Carter also said Powell felt vindicated, which painted a picture of someone who had waited patiently for a moment where facts would finally speak louder than accusations. Gratitude filled that response as well. Appreciation was directed toward a legal team that stood firm and toward supporters who never stepped away even when things looked uncertain. That kind of support can change everything, right? Without steady voices standing in the background, how easy would it have been for everything to fall apart? Carter made something else very clear, and this part stood out in a surprising way. No resentment lived in Powell's heart, no bitterness, no desire for revenge. Instead, Carter shared that prayers were being said for Ms. Myers. That detail carried weight, because situations like this often leave behind anger or deep frustration. So, another question quietly forms: how does someone go through such a painful experience and still hold on to peace instead of anger? That response did not come from nowhere. Carter linked that mindset to a lesson passed down from Powell's father, who always said that truth would eventually set a person free. That idea might sound simple at first, but in a moment like this, it feels much deeper. Holding on to that belief through years of uncertainty must have required patience that many people struggle to maintain. Even with the final outcome bringing relief, Carter did not pretend that everything simply returned to normal. The entire situation was described as emotionally disturbing, which made sense because experiences like this do not just disappear overnight. Emotional scars take time to settle, and even when truth comes out, the memory of the struggle remains. Looking beyond the courtroom, attention shifted toward the impact this situation had on Powell's career. Back in 2017, Powell spoke openly during an interview with TMZ, and the words shared painted a very heavy picture. Powell described that period as the worst time of life, which says a lot when considering everything that was at stake. Think about that for a moment. What happens when a career built over years suddenly faces doubt because of accusations? Opportunities began to slip away. Roles that once seemed within reach quietly disappeared. Powell admitted that some jobs simply went away, and that statement carried a sense of loss that went beyond money or fame. Acting careers often depend on trust, reputation, and public image. Once any of those pieces become uncertain, doors can close without warning. That kind of setback can leave anyone wondering if things will ever return to normal again. After the case in 2012, a struggle began to form around securing steady roles in television and film. Casting decisions changed, conversations shifted, momentum slowed down. For someone working in an industry that depends heavily on perception, even a small doubt can have a major effect. Still, one important detail remained clear throughout this period. Powell did not stop working.
Being an entertainer, and I'll give you an example, only left New York, not necessarily come out to Hollywood to be famous actors. We were in love with the work.
Instead of stepping away, effort continued in different directions. Independent projects became a path forward. Smaller roles began to fill the space that bigger opportunities once occupied. One notable project included Fight Night, the $1 million heist, which showed that persistence still existed even when circumstances became difficult. That raises another thought. How many people would continue pushing forward under that level of pressure? Giving up might have seemed like the easier option, Yet that path was not taken. Over time, work expanded into commercials and independent productions. These projects may not always carry the same spotlight as major films or television shows, but they still represent growth, effort, and determination. Every role taken became part of a slow rebuilding process. Careers do not always follow a straight path, and situations like this prove how quickly things can change. Yet, consistency can quietly rebuild what was once shaken. Step by step, project by project, a foundation began forming again. That kind of rebuilding requires patience, and patience often comes with its own challenges. Waiting for opportunities, proving value again, and facing public perception all at once is not an easy task. Family played a strong role during this entire journey, and that support became another important layer of the story. Carter explained that Powell's focus now centered on restoring a name that carried meaning, respect, and honor. That idea speaks to something deeper than just career recovery. A name represents identity, reputation, and legacy. Once that is questioned, rebuilding becomes personal. So a simple but powerful question comes to mind. What does it take to restore a name after public doubt? Effort alone may not be enough. Time, consistency, and truth must all work together. The desire to return that name to a place of respect shows a forward-looking mindset. Instead of staying stuck in what happened, attention shifts toward what comes next. That kind of thinking often separates those who move forward from those who remain held back by past events. Still, moving forward does not erase what happened. Lessons remain. Experiences shape decisions. Growth comes from both the good moments and the difficult ones. Looking at everything together, a full picture begins to form. A long legal battle created emotional strain, career setbacks, and public scrutiny. Support from family, legal teams, and loyal followers helped carry that weight. Faith in truth provided strength during uncertain times. Vindication brought relief, but not without lasting emotional impact. Career paths shifted, slowed down, and slowly rebuilt through persistence and smaller opportunities. A strong focus on restoring reputation now guides the next phase. And through all of this, one lingering question remains in the background. When everything feels uncertain and reputation faces doubt, what truly keeps someone going? For Powell, the answer seems to rest in a mix of belief, patience, support, and a refusal to give up even when things looked difficult. That combination does not just rebuild a career. That combination didn't just patch things back together on the surface, it slowly began to rebuild a sense of identity from the ground up, restoring confidence piece by piece, and creating space for something new to take shape. It felt like standing at the edge of a completely different chapter, one shaped not just by past struggles, but by hard-earned strength and clarity. And yet, there was one undeniable shift that changed everything moving forward. Because stepping into this new phase also meant doing it without Clifton Powell. What happens next is not only powerful, it is deeply revealing. So stay right here till the very end. Moving forward without Clifton Powell. How does someone stay relevant in an industry that changes so quickly and forgets people even faster? The answer seems to sit in consistency, patience, and a quiet kind of determination that does not always need to make noise to be felt. At 69 years old, Powell continues to work, continues to show up, and continues to take roles that keep the career moving forward. That alone says a lot, does it not? A career close to 300 credits does not just happen overnight. That kind of number builds slowly, project after project, role after role, year after year. And when looking at the kind of films involved, the picture becomes even more interesting. Appearances in Ray, which earned major recognition. A role in Menace II Society, which still holds strong cultural value, and a place in Rush Hour, a major box office hit, all point to a career that has quietly touched different corners of the film world. So the question becomes even more curious. How does someone move between serious drama, cultural storytelling, and mainstream entertainment without losing direction? A closer look shows that balance has always played a key role. Work continues not just for fame, but for stability, for family, and for purpose. There is something very real about hearing that steady acting work has helped keep a household running and a family supported. That part feels grounded, almost like a reminder that behind every film credit sits real-life responsibilities. And then another question comes to mind. What kind of mindset allows that level of discipline to stay strong over decades? Somewhere along the journey, guidance from Jamie Foxx seems to have made a lasting impact. A simple piece of advice was shared, and that advice carried weight. The message was to keep one foot connected to the community that helped build the career in the first place. That idea sounds simple, but does not that kind of advice carry deeper meaning? Staying connected to people who supported early growth, staying grounded in the audience that showed love first, and never drifting too far from that base seems to shape many long-lasting careers. When thinking about the fan base, another interesting thought appears. How does one actor connect with so many different groups across age, culture, and background? Powell has spoken about appreciation for African Americans, young white audiences, young Asians, Latinos, and women who have all supported the journey.
So it's always 3% of the people who may not like you. There's always somebody, male, female, black, white, Latino, Asian, that's a hater. But most of my haters have been black folk.
That kind of wide appeal does not come easily. Does that not suggest a level of versatility that goes beyond acting skill alone? Perhaps there is something in the way roles are chosen, or maybe something in the energy brought to each performance that allows different audiences to feel connected. That connection often becomes the quiet force that keeps a career alive even when trends change and new faces enter the spotlight. Then there is the matter of taking the craft seriously. That part often separates those who last from those who fade away. Powell has been described as putting in the same level of effort as actors like Robert De Niro and Al Pacino, both known for deep dedication to acting. Now that comparison alone might raise a question. What does that level of commitment actually look like on a daily basis? It goes beyond memorizing lines. It includes voice work, understanding how to speak clearly, learning how to shift tone, and developing characters in a way that feels believable. There is also the idea of method acting, where preparation involves stepping deeply into a role until it almost feels real. That level of effort requires patience and discipline, and it often goes unseen by audiences who only witness the final performance. Another point worth thinking about is how experience shapes choices over time. Early career decisions may focus on exposure and opportunity, while later decisions often reflect purpose and meaning. That brings attention to the upcoming project titled Final Hour, where Powell takes on the role of a prison warden. The story centers on a death row inmate during the final hour before execution and explores an unexpected connection with a priest offering last rites. Just hearing that concept might raise a quiet question. What kind of emotional depth does a role like that demand? A setting like that is heavy, filled with tension, reflection, and difficult conversations. Playing a character within that space requires more than surface-level acting. It requires understanding human emotions at a deeper level. The film is expected to appear on the festival circuit, which adds another layer to the conversation. Film festivals often highlight stories that are rich in meaning, rather than purely focused on commercial success. That choice suggests a willingness to take on roles that challenge both actor and audience. Does that not say something about where the career is heading at this stage? Instead of slowing down, there seems to be a shift toward more thoughtful storytelling and deeper roles. Looking at the full picture, there is something steady and almost reassuring about a career like this. No loud headlines dominating every moment, no constant search for attention, just a consistent presence built over time. And maybe that leads to one final thought. In an industry that often celebrates sudden success, could quiet consistency be the real strength? That idea sits quietly, but feels important. A long career filled with diverse roles, steady work, strong connections, and continued growth offers a different kind of success story. Not rushed, not forced, just built step by step over many years. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.